My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 28 years old, and this was the night they all reminded me I was the family disappointment. The one who never fit the mold. The one they pitied. The crystal chandelier above shimmered with soft gold light, casting elegant shadows over the long oak table. We were back in my parents' house for the first time in 5 years of family dinner to celebrate my brother Evan's recent promotion. The table was set with our finest china, silver napkin rings, and custom-name cards like we were royalty. Everyone was dressed for show. Everyone except me. I had chosen a simple navy blue blouse and black slacks, neat, pressed, practical. The same outfit I'd worn for the briefing earlier that afternoon. But in this room, it was the wrong uniform. My mother glanced at me as she poured herself another glass of wine. Her eyes swept me up and down. "Rachel, honey, couldn't you have worn something a little more celebratory?" I gave a polite smile. Didn't realize this was black tie. My father chuckled under his breath. "We just thought maybe you'd, I don't know, step it up for once." Evan leaned back in his chair, smug as ever. "I mean, it's not like she has a job that requires a dress code." The whole table laughed too loudly, too quickly. Except me. I just stared down at the butter knife, pressing my thumb into its cool edge. They didn't know. They had no idea who I was now. And I wasn't about to tell them. Not yet. Because tomorrow, everything would change. I took a slow breath and reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about being present even if they still saw me as the girl who walked away. "Still trying to figure things out, Rachel?" Aunt Denise chimed in sweetly, slicing through her fillet. "It's okay. Not everyone needs a career path. Some people find fulfillment in other ways, eventually." She was always more of a wanderer, my dad added. Didn't want to take the corporate route. Too much structure, I suppose. "Maybe the military was too strict for her," Evan said. "Didn't you drop out of that too?" I felt the comment hit like a slap. I hadn't dropped out. I had excelled. Quietly. Relentlessly. But they didn't know that. Because I never told them. To them, I had vanished into some vague government job years ago. Not lucrative, not flashy, not worth bragging about. Not like Evan, their golden child, the VP of strategy at Pinnacle Technologies, their pride and joy. I didn't respond. Just smiled tightly and reached for the water pitcher. My fingers trembled slightly. I hated that. But I swallowed it all down. Just like I had for years. Then my dad leaned in and said something that stuck like glass in my chest. "You know, Rachel, not everyone can be a leader. Some people are meant to support others. And that's okay." The room nodded like it was gospel truth. That's when I knew they still saw me as nothing. A ghost in slacks. The family's quiet failure. I pushed back my chair and excused myself to the kitchen. I didn't slam the door, didn't cry. I just needed space to breathe. Behind the pantry door, I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. Tomorrow's schedule glared back. 8 a.m. Secure Briefing Room. Pentagon Liaison. 9 a.m. Keynote, Defense Contract Review. 11 a.m. Oversight Committee Walkthrough. With Pinnacle executives. Including Evan. Including my father's boss. And none of them had a clue who I was about to be. Back in the dining room, the laughter continued. I leaned against the pantry door, heart pounding not from anger. From the pressure of holding back everything I'd earned. For one more night. Just one more night. I wasn't always invisible. But I learned early that being seen in my family meant fitting into their image, not your truth. I grew up in a house of ambition. My father, a senior engineer at Pinnacle Technologies, treated discipline like doctrine. Everything in our home had rules. How to speak, how to dress, when to win, and never, ever lose face. My brother Evan was born ready to impress. Varsity everything, Ivy League, straight into the company pipeline. Every holiday, our dinner table was a spreadsheet of his achievements. Me? I liked maps. Planes. Quiet spaces, strategy games. But to my parents, that wasn't a direction. It was a distraction. When I turned 17, I told them I wanted to apply to a military academy. I remember the silence after I said it. My mother set down her fork. My father blinked twice, like I'd cursed. "Why would you waste your mind on something like that?" he asked. "I want to serve," I said. "And I want to lead." Evan laughed out loud. "You? Lead soldiers? Come on, Rach, you cried during a soccer final." I didn't cry. I had a migraine. But the moment was gone. They let me apply. Didn't help, didn't support. I was accepted to West Point. On my own. When I left, my mother barely hugged me goodbye. My father gave me a firm handshake. "This is your choice," he said. "Just know you're stepping off the path." I didn't understand then that the path in our family was narrow and unforgiving. Step off, and you disappear. At the academy, I thrived academically, physically, strategically. I loved the discipline, the purpose, the camaraderie. But I didn't call home much. The few times I did, it was all Evan. When I graduated and earned my commission, I sent a photo. No one responded. For a while, I told myself it was fine. That success didn't need applause. But the truth? It stung. It stung deep. Especially when I came home one Thanksgiving freshly promoted and overheard my uncle asking if I was still doing that army thing. That army thing. No one asked what I did. No one knew I'd been deployed, that I'd coordinated strategy for 3 live operations, that I was being groomed for intelligence leadership. They just saw a girl who wore boots instead of heels, a soldier instead of a suit. The final break came 2 years ago. I called my father Rare, I know, and told him I was being assigned to a joint task force coordinating civilian military defense contracts. He sighed. "So, logistics? Admin work?" I swallowed hard. "It's high-level operational planning, interfacing with private contractors, people like you." He was quiet. Then, "Well, just be careful not to get in over your head." I hung up. And I stopped trying. From that day on, I stopped sending updates. I stopped attending holidays. I built my world alone. It wasn't bitter. Just self-preserving. I found mentors who saw me. A retired general, who became my sponsor. A female colonel who taught me grace under fire. People who didn't care where I came from, only where I was going. And now, 5 years later, here I was back at their table. Same house, same silverware, same rules. But a very different woman. They thought I was still chasing direction. Still searching for worth. They didn't know I'd become the gatekeeper to everything they valued. There's something strange about building your life in silence. You want to scream when you finally achieve something, but there's no one you want to hear it anymore. When I stopped reaching out to my family, I threw myself into work. I was stationed in Virginia, then Texas, then back to DC. I slept in temporary quarters most of the time. My suitcase never fully unpacked. But every day, I woke up with purpose. At first, I handled logistics for training ops. Then I moved into intelligence support. Eventually, I was selected for a classified task force focused on public-private defense integration, working with major contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed, and yes, Pinnacle Technologies. That was the first time I saw Evan's name on a report. He wasn't doing badly. Director of Strategic Bids. He was being groomed to lead future contracts. But his proposals kept getting kicked back because our team kept rejecting them. One night after reviewing his latest presentation, my supervisor turned to me and said, "Honestly, if this guy ever knew the woman redlining all his work was his sister, he'd probably faint." We laughed. I didn't tell him the rest of the story. Success didn't come easy. I'd work until 3 a.m., then be on base by 0600. There were days I felt like a ghost moving between briefings, coordinating multi-agency reports, juggling military culture with private sector egos. I was the youngest in every room, often the only woman. Sometimes the only one not wearing a $1 million watch. But I never let that define me. I studied harder, watched quietly, took notes on people, their power, their pressure points, their pride. When they dismissed me, I remembered. When they underestimated me, I smiled. One time, during a high-level meeting with multiple contractors, a senior exec tried to talk over me repeatedly. I let him finish, then calmly corrected his analysis with live satellite data I'd pulled that morning. He looked stunned. The room went dead quiet. Afterward, my commanding officer said, "That was artful. You didn't just shut him down. You showed him who the hell you are." I didn't chase recognition. But I didn't run from it either. Eventually, I was promoted to Colonel Liaison, the youngest in that role for our division. My job? Oversee and approve contractor access to multi-million-dollar defense bids, including the one Pinnacle Technologies had been salivating over for 6 months. The irony didn't escape me. And that's what led me here. To this exact week. To this exact contract. To this exact dinner. My father had no idea that the committee reviewing Pinnacle's newest strategic weapons pitch wasn't some vague government body. It was me. I was the final step. I could have denied the whole thing with a single sentence. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. That's why I accepted the dinner invitation. To sit quietly. To let them mock the girl who didn't fit in. To see how deeply they still believed I was nothing. Because the next day, when I walked into that conference room, they wouldn't be looking at the girl in slacks anymore. They'd be looking at the decision maker. The one who could greenlight everything they'd spent their lives chasing. Not because I wanted power, but because I'd earned it without their help, their praise, or their permission. The next morning, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hotel suite, fastening the silver insignia onto my uniform collar. Colonel Monroe, official Pentagon liaison. The blazer sat sharp across my shoulders. My nameplate gleamed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was playing dress-up in my life. I was this woman now. Entirely. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, I arrived at the secured briefing hall in the Capitol Defense Wing. Everything was prepped for a high-level project review one Pinnacle Technologies had been preparing for nearly a year. The lead presenter? My brother Evan. The man escorting him in? My father. They both walked through the glass doors without noticing me at first. Until the general cleared his throat and gestured toward me. "Gentlemen, this is the final authority overseeing your clearance briefing. Colonel Rachel Monroe." My father froze mid-step. Evan's jaw clenched. "Rachel," he said, almost under his breath. I extended my hand coolly. "Nice to see you both again. Shall we get started?" The silence was thick. Embarrassed. Electric. We sat down. I flipped open the binder full of diagrams, proposals, timelines, and projections. My voice was steady. Every word carried weight. "Let's begin with Section 4C, your vendor justification structure." Evan stumbled on the first question. I didn't let up. Not to humiliate, but to test. Just as I would with any team. Halfway through the meeting, my father still hadn't spoken. He kept stealing glances at my shoulder pins. At the firm way I spoke, at how the other officials in the room deferred to me. I was no longer his directionless daughter. I was Colonel Monroe, and this room was mine. At one point, a senior VP from Pinnacle whispered something to Evan, who whispered something back. The VP turned and said, "Excuse me, Colonel, I wasn't aware you were related to the Monroe family from internal references." I smiled. "That's because our professional paths have never crossed, until now." Another official chuckled lightly. The tension cracked. Then the moment I didn't expect. As the briefing ended, the CEO of Pinnacle walked in. A man I'd only met via secure video call. He stepped forward, shook my hand, and said, "Colonel Monroe, an honor to finally meet you in person. Your reviews have been decisive." My father's eyes widened. "Wait," he interrupted, voice hoarse. You've been reviewing our bids?" The CEO raised an eyebrow. "You didn't know?" He turned to me. "She's been instrumental. Frankly, without her insights, we would have derailed months ago." Then, addressing the room, "I think we owe Colonel Monroe a great deal of thanks. Pinnacle is honored to work under her oversight." "Ma'am." "Colonel." "Oversight." The words hung in the air like thunder. Evan looked like he'd swallowed glass. My father's face had gone pale. And I stayed composed. Because I didn't need their awe. I didn't crave their apologies. This was never about proving anything. It was about being who I am regardless of who refused to see it. As everyone began to file out, my father stepped toward me. "Rachel," he said, almost in a whisper, "why didn't you tell us?" I looked him in the eye. Calm, steady. Because I wanted to see if you could respect me without needing a title to do it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked past him, clipboard in hand. Behind me, I heard the CEO say, "Let's get moving, gentlemen. We answer to her schedule now." That evening, I sat alone on the balcony of my apartment. The city below glowed with life, but up here, it was still. My uniform hung neatly behind the bedroom door. The briefing was done, the contract greenlit. And my family, shaken. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Something had shifted in that room, something irreversible. I had seen it in my father's face. Not just shock, but recognition. The painful realization that he had spent years building walls around what he thought a daughter should be and had completely missed the woman I had become. And maybe I had built walls too. Walls made of silence. Walls that said, "You don't get to know me until you respect me." The next day, my mother called. "We'd like to have dinner," she said softly. No celebrations, no lectures, just dinner. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To stay in my calm, powerful new life and never give them another chance to wound me. But power without compassion becomes bitterness, and I didn't survive all this just to become unkind. So I agreed. That Friday, they came to my home, my apartment overlooking the Capitol. No gold chandeliers. No place cards. Just takeout, wine, and the uncomfortable quiet of a family learning to see each other again. Evan arrived last. He lingered in the doorway, unsure. "I brought something," he said, pulling out an old photo of the two of us as kids, dressed in Halloween costumes, me as a pilot. "I should have believed you," he added. "Even back then." We didn't hug. Not yet. But I nodded. That was enough for now. Halfway through dinner, my dad finally looked up and said, "I spent my whole life thinking I knew what strength looked like, and I almost missed the strongest person in this family." I didn't cry. I didn't say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't okay. I simply replied, "If we're going to move forward, I need us to be real. No more backhanded comments, no more measuring worth in job titles. Respect me, even when I choose silence. Even when I choose differently." He nodded. Slowly. "You have my word." It wasn't a grand movie. Ending. No violins. No montage. Just a quiet agreement built on everything we'd broken. And that was enough. The next morning, I returned to base. Back to my team. My mission. My rhythm. No one there called me nothing. They called me Colonel. But, more importantly, I called myself enough. Some families won't see your worth until the world does. But if you build your life with grace, strength, and quiet purpose, one day, they won't just see it, they'll have to answer to it. Have you ever been dismissed by your own family only to rise higher than they ever imagined? Share your story below. You never know who it might inspire.